Hi everyone, so this is a tutorial on setting up custom control layouts in your games. So basically, I guess we'll demonstrate some of the functionality here and just hit play real quick. So go down here. This little console will show us what we've selected. So you see it says selected upper control, selected lower control, selected side. We can go return to game, and we have our controls kind of on the side. This would be representative of our in-game screen, so it wouldn't be gray. You'd have a 3D environment or a 2D environment if you're doing something like Tetris or Arkanoid or something like that. This is just a button I set up to go back to the menu. We can go upper control layout, return to game, and we have controls at the top, go back, lower control, return, and we have controls on the bottom. So I'm going to activate this delete all saved data real quick. Hit play. Stop play, deactivate it, clear this, and then we'll get into explaining what's going on in these scenes. So right now, one of the first things I have here is this delete all saved data, and it's disabled by default. I've turned off both checkboxes. We'll take a look at this script here, and basically in this script, it's called delete all prefs, and function update, which is basically a function that just runs every frame, every second, constantly. It looks for input. Things that happen every frame would happen in it. So this one, it just says, well, we'll delete all the PlayerPrefs. PlayerPrefs delete all. Now, if you Google Unity PlayerPrefs or whatever, you'll get Unity's documentation on what they are. Basically, it's saving functionality. So it saves it to your computer, the hard drive, or whatever. And on iPhone or Android, it saves to the device. And basically, it's something that would allow you to save information and save data, or save configurations or layouts, or save your position in the game, save how much ammunition you have. PlayerPrefs are very, very awesome for saving stuff. And of course, the delete all function behind it is that we want to delete all the saved data. So when I just hit play and I turned it on, when I hit play and then turned it back off, that's to delete all the saved data. While it's active, if you hit play, it's deleting all the saved data while you're playing. So of course we don't want it on all the time, but we turn it on, we'll hit play, turn play off, and then deactivate it. It'll help delete and clear all of our saved data, so we start with a fresh scene. So if I hit return to game and I go in the game, by default, without the player selecting anything, our controls go into a lower control scheme here at the bottom. So we have a standard respawn, pause button, a brake button, and a gas button. So it's set up for like a racing game, but this could move around or set up custom controls for anything that you want. It could also move around some of your HUD elements like lap counter, time counter, ammunition count, anything you have up here at the top or bottom or wherever you'd have it. This will allow you to move anything around. So that's our delete all save data thing in there, and we're not going to use it very often. Just once in a while to delete our stuff. We have our main camera. I just kind of set it to a dark gray. It doesn't actually need to be set to skybox. It could just be depth only, which is fine. It's a menu UI camera, so no skybox, no background, none of that. Go back. It's orthographic, and it's set to like a size of 5. You could set the orthographic size to like 10. It's you can look that up, Unity orthographic camera size, depending on resolution. We're doing 1024 by 768 right here, so basically sort of like an iPad first and second gen. So, without further ado, we have these folders here that you can kind of expand and de-expand, and basically those are created by GameObject. Create empty. I go over here, reset the position to 0 it out. I name it something, and then you drag things into it, and it becomes kind of a container for different objects. So that's how I created this selection colliders container and text UI container. Now, in these selection colliders, I try to name things very appropriately. These are the colliders that you actually click on that select things. So if I were to add a component mesh renderer, you'll now see these colliders. They're 3D cubes, and basically I created those by going GameObject, create other, cube, there's the cube, and then I remove the mesh renderer. So it doesn't render. It's an invisible collider, which is kind of trigger some things. It's not set to trigger, it's just set to be a collider. I'm going to remove the mesh renderers, but you can see that those are the selection colliders. And like lower control collider is the pink thing that sits right behind lower control layout. Return to game collider sits here behind return to game. So when my mouse is over it and I click on it, it hits that collider, and that's what causes our selection to work. Now, in Text UI, it's just an empty container, and it holds all of our GUI text objects, okay? Which are this, where it says, I don't know why let me hit play real quick. Okay, it wasn't refreshing for some odd reason. So these are basically, and it's still not refreshing. That's very strange. But anyway, these are GUI text objects that basically are representative of what would be in your menu. Now you don't have to use GUI text. You can use GUI textures, anything you want. A Photoshop PSD, big image file that covers the whole thing. The only important thing are these colliders being positioned behind where you want to click. So these are like the visual, and these are the actual functional buttons. You know, these colliders. Okay? Now we have an object in the scene called Settings Manager, and we'll open that up. And so the script is done here to save you a bunch of typing. I'm going to include this entire project with all the scripts and everything just like you see it in a Dropbox link in the video description, so you don't have to type any of this out by hand, but I'd like to go through it and kind of explain to you what is going on with this. So basically at the top we have Pragma Strict here, typed just like that, and when you're working on Android or iOS or anything like that, the mobile platforms, there's a thing called Dynamic Type Inference, and you can Google that and get the details on it, but basically it lets Unity with Dynamic Type Inference, you don't have to really specifically define what the type of a variable is, like if a variable is a Boolean or an integer, whatever. Unity can kind of guess dynamic type inference, so it can infer dynamically what it might be, and it usually makes the right guess. So whereas when you're developing for mobile, iOS or Android, you need to really tell it directly what type of variable is or whatever. So it doesn't try to guess. It's just too intensive for mobile platforms. So anyway, that's why you'll see Pragma Strict up top. You can also Google that, Pragma Strict and Unity, and Google, and you'll see why we add that. Now function update is a Unity function or whatever, and it's called update. So yes, it updates every frame that your game's running. So it's looking for input or processing physics or anything that needs to happen every single frame. You know, not once in the game, but all the time. So in this case, it's looking for if input get mouse button down 0. Mouse button down 0 is the left mouse button, the same one that I'm clicking right now to click on it. There's also mouse button up. So basically that says, well, when you click down, when you release the mouse button up, this action would all occur. Mouse button down is when you click down. The action would occur immediately when you click down. And 0 just means it's the left mouse button. 1 is like, I think, the right mouse button. And 2 is middle mouse button. I may have that backwards, but... So our next one is just establishing a variable here in the function called var_ray. And it's saying camera main, screen point to ray, mouse position. So really what that's doing, it's shooting out a raycast, which is like an invisible line that shoots out from camera main, from in the middle of the screen at the mouse position, wherever you click down on the mouse. So camera main is kind of Unity shorthand for, we'll go over here and look, main camera, which it doesn't have to be named main camera, but the tag needs to always be main camera for camera main functionality to work. This could be called UI camera or something like that, but that tag needs to be main camera in order to use camera main. So it's saying we'll look in the scene for any camera tagged main camera, and then we're going to shoot that ray out from the screen at the mouse position. And then this is just another variable for hit, saying, hey, where did that raycast hit? What did it hit? Okay, so this is letting us shoot the ray and looking for where it hit. And we're saying, all right, well, if that raycast, came out and hit 50 units out. Now, the reason I put the 50 in here, you maybe see larger numbers like 500, 250. That's saying only look 50 units out for anything that this ray might hit. Now, if it was like 850 here, that ray would go out 850 units looking for some kind of collider or object to strike or hit. We don't want to do that. That's a little bit more CPU intensive. Looking out further, that's more physics calculations going out into infinity and beyond. So we just want to go out like 50 units. I'll demonstrate that. So our selection colliders actually sit right there in the world, and then our camera sits right there. So you can see they look to be only about maybe 20 units apart if you're using these little grid boxes here. So really we could probably get away with putting 25. Basically it's going to shoot that little ray out this way along the z-axis right there from your screen, and it's going to go out 50 units, which it probably would go somewhere out here, and it's going to check for anything there and in between. So then we say down here, this pink text is where you put the name of the object that you want to click on. Okay, so we say if we hit a collider, that raycast that's shooting out, if we hit a collider that has the name upper controls collider. So we actually have upper controls collider right here. So when that ray shoots out, hits this collider, the script's going to say if it happens, then everything inside of these brackets we want to occur. So this is something new right here, PlayerPrefs. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the video. It's saving functionality. So we're saying, hey, we want to save something if that ray hits that upper controls collider. And we're saying we want to set int, which you're going to have to look in the details of PlayerPrefs. Set int is a built-in PlayerPrefs functionality for setting an integer, which we wanted to set either a 1 or a 0, basically an on or an off, really. Think about it in binary. That's why you see 1, 0, 0. It means this one's going to be on, these are going to be off, ones and zeros. And then controls 1, 2, and 3 in the quotes are really just names we're kind of giving that integer. I'm saying, all right, well, you know, this first one here we'd set would be for controls 1. So it lets me know that controls 2 would be off, and controls 3 would be off, and 2. Okay, so that's our if. Now we have else if, which means, okay, if these things occur, other than, you know, that, else, if it hits a collider named lower controls collider, which is right here, and lower controls collider goes right behind lower control, let's add that, goes right behind that. So you see how that works. So if we click that button, I'm going to hit play again to make that pink go away. I don't know why it's not updating in real time. And then, so we say, all right, turn controls 2 on, which is off up here. And then turn controls 1 and 3 off. Okay? Let me fix this. Debug log is pretty neat. That's what lets these messages print out right here. So I'll show you this working real quick. Let's hit play. We'll click that. You see this selected upper control setup. So it lets me know I clicked on upper control layout. It's kind of a debugging. Or and we can hit clear and clear that out. Kind of a way to debug and see. That's what it's going to print right there. So if we hit this collider, upper controls collider, it's going to actually print this out and say, hey, you selected the upper control layout. And it's going to do that for every single one of them. So same thing here, hit collider name equals side controls collider. Turn on controls 3, turn off all the other ones. And then lastly, we say else if we hit a collider, return to game collider, application load level game scene. So that's actually our little button right here that lets me leave my menu and go back to our game. Or basically go to any scene that you want to go to, whether it's back to your main menu, back into your game, whatever. So our collider for that, which would be there, we'll go in here, turn it on, there it is. If we hit that little collider, it's going to actually return to, it's going to say application load level, which is Unity's built-in functionality for going to a new scene. We're going to go to a scene called game scene, which if we look up here, we're in our, I'm not going to save it, we're in our settings menu screen right now. This is our game scene. Now an important thing for application load level to be able to work, your scenes here, opened up, have to be added into the build settings in Unity, which is found in File, Build Settings. And you can see my game scene and my settings menu screen are both in there. They need to be turned on because you can turn them off and uncheck them and they won't be actively built. So they need to be added in there. Basically whatever scene, which I have game scene up here open in the upper left, add current is what you would click, and I'm not going to add it because I've already added it in. It will add it twice, which really won't hurt anything. I could add it and then just deactivate it. I think there are some scripts out there to clean that up and remove redundant scenes. I don't know how to do that, but I just turn it off and it won't build. So basically they need to be added in there. Then application load level will work. Okay, we're going to go back to our settings, and I'm actually going to demonstrate that. So when we click it, it's going to load it, and then we went into our game menu scene. Okay, so that's the I'm going to hit Control S and save it. That is, go back here. That's our settings manager, and that's the entire script that controls that. Basically, it's just getting mouse input, and this is also where you would put all of your touch right here. This is where you put your var touches, in touches, and all that for mobile and Android. And then you could say in here, well, if you hit the collider, with the touch or whatever, then do that, and it would work. For right now, it's set up for PC and the mouse. Okay? And it's just basically a script that helps us detect hitting any one of these colliders in the scene, and it, does actions based on that. So we'll actually go into our game scene now. Take a look at that. We have our settings menu button, which is, let me add another mesh renderer onto it. And that's basically the button that sits behind this control settings. Now, in your game, when you're in the game and you hit pause, you'd probably pop up a menu that would say resume, play, and then control settings button in there. Okay, in my generic kind of example right here, we just have a GUI text here in the middle with a collider behind it. You're going to do something probably quite a bit fancier. Okay, I'm going to take the mesh renderer back off of it. And we're going to go look into this script called settings menu button that's applied to that collider there. The real simple script. We have our pragma strict up there again, which you'll want for iOS and Android. And we have a function update, which is every single frame again, and it's looking for the mouse input, mouse button 0, left mouse button. It's shooting the ray from the main camera again, looking for a hit, 50 units out. We're just saying simply in this one, if you hit that collider named settings menu button right here, then application load level settings menu screen. So you can see basically it was just functionality for me that when we went into this game scene, I could click on this and we can immediately go back to the menu. So you may have different functionality in your game. Script's super simple. All this does is return me back to my menu. So I have a UI camera in here. Okay, it's an orthographic camera, size of 5 or whatever. Again, we're doing 1024 by 768 iPad resolution. You can tweak your orthographic size here however you like on your camera. I just usually set it to 5. We have an object in the scene here called UI Manager. And this basically is, you can name it whatever you want, but in this scene for the example, I named it the thing that kind of manages all the UI stuff. Okay? So, and then we'll look real quick at UI textures, which is just an empty container. And these are all of my GUI textures here. You'll see they're just the textures standard. They have pixel inset values, which you can see allow you to kind of move where it is on the screen. These are what we're going to use in the script to basically move these objects around into different layouts. Width and height we're not really going to mess with. I have a different tutorial where you can use these width and height to actually scale down or up your GUI textures so that you can have retina textures and then smaller textures for 3GS or something smaller, and then scale them up huge for that crazy new iPad that has an insane resolution. So they're all just GUI textures. They're all set to GUI, your textures should be, and they're all set to true color and not compressed. Okay, you don't want to have any compressed UI textures. They look cruddy and all that and blurry. So basically, I just wanted to explain these textures down here on the screen. You can have any kind of textures you want, but these are the ones that I use for the example. So going back to the UI Manager, we see that we plugged in our break button. It's looking for a type of GUI texture here, and we just kind of, drag them over and plug them in that way. Like normally by default, it will kind of appear like empty like that, and then you would drag it in. This just lets the UI Manager know, where these objects are and how to use them. You also see upper controls layout, lower and side controls. We have 3 different custom control layouts, and by default, They're all set to 0. And this is where the PlayerPrefs is going to plug in. When we looked at the script, I don't have it open, but when we looked at the script earlier, some were on with a 1 and some were off with a 0. Right now this shows, hey, they're all off. Now I put the GUI textures into a lower screen configuration by default. You want to start your player off with some kind of default control configuration in the event that they don't have one selected yet, like they haven't even went into your control settings and kind of tweaked a different control setting. Give them a default setting by basically just moving these around with the pixel inset wherever you want them to be. Okay, so let's dig into this script real quick. And up here, I've commented it pretty good. This is what this green stuff is. It's commented, and it has the 2 forward slashes. Basically, the script won't process anything behind those forward slashes in green. Okay? If you want to do a new line of commenting, just typing won't do the trick. Will give you errors. You're going to put another set of forward slashes in front of it. Okay? And I said this is where you plug in your GUI textures that you want in your HUD. So there you go. Variable break button GUI texture. That is where it creates this slot for you to plug it in like that. Kind of neat. This is what's creating the empty slots for the variables, all set to 0. And these are our control layouts, upper, lower, side. They're all set to 0, so they're not being used by default. And then function start is like our function update down here, except this occurs when the scene starts up. You know, when you hit play and everything in the scene gets kind of running and going, this is what function start does. So it does not run every frame. It only runs when the game starts up. So it's really a good spot to kind of put things that you want to kind of cache up front or have access to when the game starts. But you know, things you might want to look for in your game and have the script know where they are, but you don't want to be looking for them down here in update every single frame. You want to save yourself some CPU cycles and some searching and all that. Just do it in start. So basically we're saying up here, let's take that upper controls layout variable, which is right here with the var in front of it. Let's take it and start and say that it's going to represent or be replaced by PlayerPrefs getInt controls 1. Now I'm going to, I think it's settings manager. Okay, so if we look back on this, we saw up here when you hit these colliders or clicked on the buttons, we did PlayerPrefs setInt controls 1, and we would set it to a value of 1. So the key here is the set integer. It's basically saying, hey, set that number to controls 1, set it to 1. Okay, when we go back to our UI manager, we're saying, hey, let's get the integer, okay, for controls 1. So that's what function start is going to do in this scene. It's going to look for each one of these controls and say, hey, let's get those integers from that other scene that were saved by PlayerPrefs, so they exist in all the scenes. Let's get the integers for all the control types. And then in update, I did a little bit of logic in here and said, well, if the upper control layout value is 1, which is upper control layout right here, if that integer it gets is 1, then do a function called upper controls. So let's set that to upper controls, okay? And then I did a nifty little debug log down here which just says, hey, the upper controls are active in the game scene. That lets you know we're using upper controls, though visually you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see it in your game using the upper control, okay? And then I say else if lower control layout is 1, if it's turned on, then let's do lower controls function, and then let's print out in the little console down here that lower controls are active. And the same thing for side controls. So it's all 3 of our possible control layouts. It's seeking if each one is set to 1. Okay? Now, when we say upper controls here, this is sending this down somewhere lower in the script down here. It's sending it to this function, which function upper controls is right here. So then it's going, all right, well, if that value is equal to 1, do this, go down here, and then cause all these things to happen. This is where it takes those GUI textures that we plugged in up here, like gas button, and it literally takes gas button.gui texture, pixel inset.x, and sets it 840 pixels over an x. And then it takes the gas button GUI texture pixel inset y and y, which is up and down, and moves it 540 pixels. Okay? And it does this for the break button, the respawn button, the pause button, and any other buttons that you would put in here. So this is basically going to take all these GUI textures and it's going to move them into these X and Y positions set right here for upper controls. So this is basically going to move all of them sort of towards the top of the screen up here. Okay? If our lower control layout value equals 1, then we're going to function lower controls here, which is right here. And I've commented it out too if you kind of forget. And basically this is going to set them X 840 pixels, Y only 50 pixels, and off from the bottom. It's going to tweak all of them to be on the bottom of the screen, basically where they are by default right here. Okay? And then of course if our side control layout equals 1, then side controls are active and it's going to go function side controls and it's going to move all of them into on the side. I think I set them to be on the right hand side. You could tweak these values right here and move them on the left hand side, or you don't even have to do side, lower, and upper. You could do middle, angular, whatever, different kind of controls. So basically the UI manager is doing that. It's looking back at our settings manager in the settings menu here. I'll go back. It's looking for, in this script here, for this information that was set depending on which collider was clicked on in here. Okay, and then when we get in game, this game scene starts up. Oh, wrong script. Starts up. Definitely wrong script. Right here. And then it grabs that information depending on what colliders were clicked on. It says if the first collider was clicked on, else if the first one, was clicked on. So we'll actually check this functionality out. I'm going to go back to our settings menu. I think I clicked a few things, so I'm going to go and just make sure all of my saved data is deleted. Turn it off. And then I'm going to go in here. And I'm going to move this console over so we can see it kind of printing out. Okay. I'm going to click upper control, and then I'm going to return to the game. And we have upper controls up here on the top. All those GUI textures have been shifted. I'm going to click lower control. You'll see selected control, lower control setup. Return to game. And then it says lower controls active. And then there they are on the bottom. I'm going to go back. What did we not do? Side control? It says selected side control setup. I'm going to go return to game. And they're on the side. And then I'm going to go back. Okay, remember, we had side controls. Okay, so I'm going to, we stopped playing. I'm going to hit play again. Return to game. And it remembers our side controls. Okay, let's do upper control. Okay, return to game. They're in the top. I'm going to stop playing. Normally Unity wouldn't remember that, but since we're using PlayerPrefs and save data, we could turn it off, shut it down, reboot Unity, return to game. We have upper controls. And to prove the point on that, we'll actually close it down. We'll reboot Unity up real quick again. Remember, we had upper controls selected. Okay. We'll return. We're in upper controls. Now remember, upper controls active. By default, we had them in the lower configuration. So this is saving this information. They exit your app on the Android or iOS or whatever. This remembers the control configuration that they last used. PC, Mac, this also remembers the same configuration that they last chose. So hopefully everything in here was pretty clear about how you're clicking or touching on these colliders and how they're used to detect the click or the touch, how these elements right here are just purely visual. They don't actually mean anything. In fact, with that completely gone, I could still click selected lower control setup, and it would still process it, because really what's happening is these colliders are getting hit. Nothing in Unity really cares about what these visuals are. They're just purely visual. So it's very similar to having your 3D art world, your 3D polygons and your art and textures, and then having your collision mesh. So the collision mesh is what's actually holding your player in the world, and if you're shooting at a wall or running into a wall, that's what you're hitting. You're not actually hitting the art. So hopefully this is, go back to the game scene, and hopefully this is all very clear. and helps you guys set up your own custom layouts to let players kind of choose their own layouts, top, bottom, whatever. The same theory can be used to basically move anything around. If you wanted to allow them to customize your menus, you could do that this way as well. And of course, on my thing here, I'm using GUI textures. Um, you could use pretty much any kind of texture that you wanted in there. So hopefully this keeps it clear. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, just hit me up in the comments section here on the video, and I will respond. Usually I respond like the same day or within the week or whatever, and I'll go through there and help you solve any problems you're having with scripts or anything with the functionality. I'll even help you add functionality if you want to help share your scripts and stuff like that. This full project will be zipped up in an archive with a Dropbox link. You can download it, play with the exact same scene I'm playing with right here, and kind of experiment and build your own things off of it. So with that, I'm done, and thank you.